Now we get to interval level measurement. And with interval level measurement, you have an equal magnitude between each increment. The distance between 1 and 2 is the same as the distance between 2 and 3. Now, this is not true with ordinal measurement. Think of a horse race with ordinal measurement. Between first and second place can be by a nose, whereas the distance between third and fourth place can be, coming up way behind. The order matters, but the distance between any 2 points is not conveyed by the numbers first, second, and third. In a race, what you'd look at is the amount of time from start to finish, which would give you the distance between the places. But the place number itself doesn't tell you anything about distance. So in interval level measurement, we do have that information. However, the distance from 0 is not in any way a true distance from 0. The 0 on the scale of interval level measurement is a convention. The 0 on the Fahrenheit scale doesn't mean no heat. It just means where 0 happens to lie on that scale. In many of the scales that we use in education, there is no 0, particularly just so that people don't make the mistake of thinking that 0 would be meaningful. So you can't get a 0 on the SAT. There's no such thing. And they could have scaled the SAT so that a 0 appeared on the scale, but it would be meaningless, and in fact, it would lead people up a blind alley. You probably remember that if you convert values to what are called z-scores, the mean of a z-score is 0 and the standard deviation is 1. So if you said, well, you have a mean score on the SAT and we've scaled that so that the mean is 0, then people with average scores would think that they had 0 of whatever it is that the SAT measures. So 0 is simply a thing that a value that may or may not be included on an interval level scale. And often in education, we prefer not to use 0 values because they convey information that can be easily misunderstood. But if you have them, you have them. They're like you see on the classroom thermometer. They're in fairly, arbitrary places. They're arbitrary. Although 0 is arbitrary, because you have this scale with even increments, then you can calculate things like mean, standard deviation, Pearson product, moment correlation, and all things that you've been able to calculate before. And then we get to what we call the highest level of measurement, which is ratio measurement. In ratio measurement, you take all the characteristics of the previous levels of measurement, and you add in that a 0 is not just conventional. So, this graph is of infant mortality rates. It is possible for there to be 0 infant mortality per live birth. So anything that is a real count of actual things happening can be, as long as the things that are happening are of equal magnitude, that is ratio level measurement. Let me think. 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 4 pounds, 5 pounds, those are all as compared to an empty scale with a weight of 0. Like an interval level measurement like temperature. You can convert Fahrenheit temperature to Celsius temperature. You can convert pounds to kilos. So the pound scale is still a scale, and it's just one scale among other scales for weight. But where it differs from the temperature scale is that 0 is 0, whether it's pounds or kilos or any other system of weight. So in comparison, 0 Fahrenheit is not 0 centigrade, and also the one thing you can look at is is it meaningful to double something in a non-ratio scale? It generally will not be. You would never say that on an intelligence test, one value was twice as intelligent as another. On a pound scale, 4 pounds is twice as heavy as 2 pounds. But on an intelligence scale, 130 is not twice as smart as 60. And with statistics, you can do everything you can do with all the previous forms, but it's also meaningful to calculate percentages of a whole, because a whole is part of the scale, because 0 is true. So we're just going to put up a little kind of self-question about what you can, what are different levels of measurement for different things we might measure, and what statistics we might find permissible for those. So down, I've got 5 examples here: calendar date, borough, minutes elapsed since the start of something, basketball free throws, and intelligence. And there's some questions you can ask yourself when thinking about what level of measurement any of these are. Do the different values that could be defined indicate distinct and non-overlapping qualities? Are the values ordered such that numerical progression means more? Is the difference between 2 adjacent values in the construct equal at all parts of the scale? And is there a 0 point? I put a little asterisk next to intelligence because I'm going to use, throughout the term, I will sometimes be using intelligence as an example, intelligence test. And I am just going to, I will probably have to do it again, but forestall a lot of discussion on the nature of intelligence. When I refer to intelligence, I will be referring to whatever is that thing, usually referred to in the field as G, that intelligence test, like the WISC and the IQ test measure. Whatever it is that intelligence tests measure, which they do systematically, reliably, and with quite a bit of consensus. Whatever it is that they measure, I'm going to call that intelligence. Or if I'm being more meticulous, I'll call it G. But I'm not going to try to talk about what is the nature of that, at least not. So there are your 5. While I've been digressing on the area of intelligence, you have probably been able to think about these things. So let's start with the first one. Calendar days. What do you think? I'm going to kind of go through these. You're thinking about this, think about this, make a note on your file. Do the different values of a calendar date indicate distinct and non-overlapping qualities of the calendar? So is July 3rd distinct from July 4th and July 2nd and April 9th on some quality, on the calendar, on time of the year, day of the year. Yes, you know when one day starts and one day ends. Are they ordered? Yes, we all can agree that September 8th appears after within a given year, July 3rd. Is the difference between two adjacent values in the level of the construct equals at all part of the scale? Yes, one day from another is always the same. Is there a 0 point that represents a real 0? No. Different calendars start at different times. A lot of cultures all over the world have and still do have different calendars. They start at different times of the year. Sometimes actually even the length of the calendar is not 365 days. Different places have different calendars, different ways of arranging things. So there is no 0 point that represents a real, this is the beginning of the year. So that puts calendar date at what level of measurement? Interval. Okay, I'm going to skip New York City Borough for just a minute. I know you're going to be really mad that I did that. Minutes elapsed since the start. I say go. Time passes. People then at some point people have finished some task, and I clock how many minutes have elapsed for each person before they finish a task. What level of measurement? Well, if somebody has 3 minutes, does that mean that they have 3 minutes only and they're not also in 2 minutes and 4 minutes? They can't belong to three. When I click my time, I didn't click them as being in three groups at the same time. No, they've got a three. They're not also a four. So that means it's more than categorical or nominal. Yes, the values are ordered. So it's at least 4 is definitely more minutes than 3. 4 is 1 more minute than 3, just like 3 is 1 more minute than 4. So it meets our third criteria. And is there a 0 point? Yes. There was a time when before I said start, that was 0. Off to the races after I said start. So this is true ratio level measurement. As basketball free throws are true, it can be 0, it can be whatever. Intelligence. Now, we're talking about scores on an intelligence test. So a person who has one score doesn't have another score. So it's more than nominal. The values are ordered so that higher is intended to mean more. Where things like intelligence start to get a little funny, because someone might say, well, means more of what? If you have a higher IQ score than someone else, then you have more of what? Well, you have more of the thing that we call IQ or G or general intelligence, which we pretty much know because we measured it as a circular argument. It's kind of a funny argument, but we're not sure really if you have 129 IQ, if you really have any more intelligence with 127 IQ. But we, to the extent that we have some convention for what IQ is measured or intelligence as measured on IQ tests is, we're pretty sure that there's a difference in that thing between somebody with a score of 70 and a score of 100. So we're going to say, they're ordinal. Now you start to get, is the difference between two adjacent levels on the construct, with all parts I've written that, but is, are there equal distances at all parts of the scale? So is the distance between the intelligence of someone with an IQ of 150, I'm sorry, compared to someone with an IQ of 130. Okay, that's 20 points. Is that the same magnitude of difference in intelligence as the difference between somebody with an IQ of 90 to someone with an IQ of 110? That's 20 points. 20 points difference between 90 IQ and 110, and 20 between 130 and 150. And one of the questions one of my professors used to say is, if people came in and some of them had a 90 IQ and some of them had a 10 IQ, do you think 110, do you think that in 15 minutes of conversation I could figure out what that difference was, or figure out that there was a difference in their IQ? Me, I think probably not. Then I say, when someone comes in with 130 and someone comes in with 150, would I recognize that difference? And I think to myself, 150, that's pretty spectacular. I would expect that person to act to be different. That may not, the IQ, we don't really know if that's an interval level scale. We just probably don't know. What we do is we act like it is. Certainly a 0 on the scale is no intelligence. And in fact, on our IQ scales, zeros are non-existing values. But we could make it so that there was an IQ scale of 0, but it wouldn't be meaningful because there's really no such thing as having no intelligence, particularly as intelligence is measured variably. So the IQ scale is odd, as many of our educational and psychological measurements are, in that it probably doesn't quite meet the criteria for an interval scale, but we constantly treat it like it does, calculate means, standard deviations, things like that. And now I'm going to go back to the New York City borough because it's funny. Little joke, very little joke. New York City borough ought to be nominal or categorical. Okay, there are 5 boroughs: Manhattan, Staten Island, Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn. So I tell my husband this at dinner last night, it's nominal, it's obvious. Oh my God, he has none of it. He insists that it's ranked. And so whether the ranks, it's Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island. And I say, oh, you're just doing that by best borough. He says, no. He says, that's the canonical rank. It conveys great history of New York City and the formation and the allegiances. Manhattan is first because it was the first one founded by the Dutch or whoever, but then Brooklyn is second because it was a city, and it was actually a city that was bigger than anything on Manhattan for many years, and then blah, 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 and there's this whole story behind it, and to him, it's not only written in stone, and not only is it at least ordinal measurement, but one of the things is that it's possible categories kind of overlap, that it certainly would be possible that there was some kind of bleed between Queens and Brooklyn, at least at some point in time, that the categories change and have changed. Crazy stuff. What is that? That's qualitative. So for me, the boroughs are nominal, right? You're in one borough, you're not in another borough. For him, when you have overlapping multi-membership categories that can change and move in relationship to one another and overlap with one another, that's qualitative membership. Qualitative, and it's not really measurement, because mathematically can't do anything with those numbers whatsoever. They can convey a lot of meaning and information, but you can't do math with them. That's the end of this presentation. Thank you very much. I hope you had fun.